We are live. Welcome everybody to another session of, I guess, cold calling live show. Not so much live cold calling, but today we got a special guest with us, Mr. Woodward. Greg Woodward's back in the house.
Hello.
Woodward
Thanks for
Strategies.
having me.
And today we've got an opportunity to go through what you're calling BS. You're going to talk some BS today.
That's right.
Your BS framework, and this came up for those of you who have tuned in for our start, stop, repeat sessions. Last time we had some folks get into the, I guess we call it like the monologue or the longer section of your scripts, the meat and potatoes, your value pitch, whatever you want to call it. And I had mentioned that Woodward had a really awesome framework that I'd recently been trying out with some success. And I thought, hey, why don't we just bring in the man, the myth, the legend to talk about it today. And so the first part of the show today, we're gonna walk through his framework, introduce the concept, and then, of course, as always, anyone who's here, feel free to chat and your questions in as it goes. If we have some volunteers, we'll have some folks come in and walk through their framework and maybe how we can workshop some of the things we learned today into your actual script, and then we'll keep a few minutes at the end for some Q&A. So, Woodward, for those who don't know you, brief introduction. Who is Woodward and what are you up to? And then we'll get right into your framework today.
Yeah. Woodward Strategies is a sales training company based in Washington, D.C. I work with companies in 13 countries, training their sales teams, focusing on inbound and outbound. I don't deal with closing, so it's early part of the sales process. What we're going to get into today is really going to be focusing on that part of the process where you're making cold calls, you're making follow-up calls. To bring people into the pipeline.
Amazing. And if you haven't stumbled across Woodward, he actually is one of my top outbound sales strategists, consultants, trainers. I believe a lot in what he believes and the stuff that he trains, and recently just launched an individual program. So if you're at a company that maybe isn't invested in your own training, Woodward has a fast track program you might be interested in too. So check out Woodward, what you hear today. So let's get into the BS framework, Woodward. What is this thing? Is it what it sounds like, or what are we talking about?
Well, I wish it was what it sounds like.
Is it?
No. Have you ever, let me back it up a bit. And I was thinking about this yesterday. People can relate to this. Have you ever asked somebody what they do, in a casual conversation where, you're just making conversation and they get into this like monologue? It has too much detail. They're just talking too much about it. They start over explaining it and it starts to sound more like a corporate sort of pitch than anything. I think that's probably happened to most people. The same exact thing happens when you have a lot to get through on a cold call. And there's a point where the prospect starts to think about something else. Just like if you ask somebody what they do and they start over explaining it, there's a point where your mind goes, just tell me what you do in one word and we just have another conversation. I don't really care. When that happens, the call is over. So it's the same thing. So when the moment the prospect starts to think about something else on a cold call, because you're talking too much and it's starting to look like a familiar pattern, what happens is the moment that they start thinking about something else, they prepare themselves to deflect. And, as a sales rep, sometimes you kind of have to get through a little bit, and sometimes it's a little technical, depending on who your persona is. And what we're going to show you is a way to be able to not take anything out of that script, but make it more digestible for the prospect using the word but and the word so strategically. And what those words actually do, and I'm going to show you what those words actually do, is pull the prospect back into the conversation the moment they start to drift away from it. Pulls them back in. And what it does is it makes what you're saying sound more digestible and sound like it's less than it actually is.
Yeah, and the reason why I really enjoy this is because, especially with a cold call, it's difficult for you to get through in the first place lots of times. And this other piece is actually having them hear what you have to say before, getting the proverbial stiff arm, right? Like I like to say you get. And So there's lots of tactics that you can use to break up the conversation earlier on, in your intro. You're starting to establish this two-way dialogue. But I've struggled a lot with, all right, well, once I get into that real permission, the magic words we're looking for of like, okay, well, what do you do?
Yeah.
Historically, I've struggled with making that short and concise. And maybe that's just because I'm not a wordsmith. And I think a lot of reps struggle with this. It's okay, now I've got my potential shot. They've asked me what I do. How do I actually get through enough information where, one, they're hearing me, but two, they actually understand the why, so that I can get that in front of them and get out without prolonging this too long, and again, getting shut down because I've overfried the eggs. And
Yeah.
so this framework, when you showed it to me a couple weeks ago, I was really excited about trying it out, and it seems to really work. And so I'm excited to take a step back and have you introduce this to this group, because there's some psychology built into it. And I'm not sure if the screen share is going to work for you, Woodward, but if you want to pull up what this is and maybe the examples around how this works with and without it. And this will help set the stage for today's conversation.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to show it to you like this. This is without it. Okay. This is a cold call. We're going to use the one we used before, Ryan. This is phone ready leads.
Perfect.
I want everybody that's listening to this clear their head real quick and literally picture yourself as the prospect picking up the phone. So you're caught off guard, and I'm going to read the script. Ryan's going to be the prospect. And I want you to pay real close attention to where in this script you start to think about something else. Okay. Where you start to pull away from it a little bit. Okay. Ryan, answer the phone.
Hey, this is Ryan.
Hi, Ryan. My name's Greg Woodward. You're not expecting my call. In fact, I think it's actually the first time we've spoken. Do you mind if I take a half a minute to share why I called, and you can tell me if it's relevant?
Go ahead. What's up?
Okay. For context, Ryan, I see that Nuco has sales reps, and the reason I'm calling, I wanted to share some information about a service we're providing for industrial companies that reduces the number of calls it takes to get a prospect on the phone. For example, in your space right now, it takes reps an average of 35 calls to speak with someone, and what we do cuts that down to about 4 calls. If I can ask, are your reps using the phone to prospect for new business? Okay. Where did you lose me?
Right around send some information, share some information. By the time you said that, I was starting to wander a little bit. So, I got piqued a little bit more when you mentioned providing it for a vertical of companies, but now all of a sudden it's like, okay, when's this guy going to get to it? It started to prolong a little bit for me.
Okay, so you get some sirens in the background here. So you lost me in sort of the beginning of my monologue.
Yep.
Okay, that's when you started to pull away from it. Okay, I'm going to do it again, and all I'm going to do is add the words but and so. This is the BS. I'm going to add the BS. And I want you to clear your head if you're listening to this and pay attention to how these words pull you back into the conversation and how it makes what I'm saying, which is the same exact words. I'm actually using more words in this example, how it makes it feel more digestible. Ryan, answer the phone.
Hey, this is Ryan.
Hi, Ryan. My name's Greg Woodward. You're not expecting my call. In fact, I think it's actually the first time we've spoken. Do you mind if I take a half a minute to share why I called, and you can let me know if it's relevant?
Yeah, you got 30 seconds. What's up?
Okay. For context, Ryan, I see that Nuco has sales reps, but the reason for my call, I wanted to share some information about a service that we're providing for industrial companies that reduces the number of calls it takes to get a prospect on the phone. So, for example, in your space right now, it takes reps an average of 35 calls to speak with someone. And what we do cuts that down to about 4 calls. But if I can ask, are your reps using the phone to prospect for new business? Feel a little different, doesn't it?
It really does. And I don't know, I'm curious to hear the audience here. Feel free to chat it in here, but especially that first but for me, because that's where I was getting lost in the first place. All of a sudden it piques my interest.
Yeah. Right when you start to drift back, that pulls you back in. It's sort of like you're just pulling them right back in, and it cuts it up. So the reps that use this, one of your reps is using this, and they're just like, I can't believe how incredibly effective this is. So try it out. It is. You can take any script that you're using and just insert these. the buts and the so's followed by a very short pause before you continue. It just cuts it up, makes it digestible. The other thing I want to call out that's unrelated to the buts and so's, okay, the goal of this script here is to get the conversation started in a way where the prospect has proper context about what you want to talk about, okay? Like they have relevant clarity. And you're able to get them talking with an open-ended question. But this question down here, the first question that I ask, after I give them the proper context, they know exactly what this is about. I don't care what the answer to this question is. I don't care. Ryan, go ahead and say no to me for that.
No, cold calling's dead.
Okay. So your reps aren't using the phone to prospect at all?
No, not at all.
Do you want them to be?
I mean, no one picks up.
They don't? So now I'm having a conversation. So if you say yes to that or no to that, like the conversation is still going to continue, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mirror back what you said to me. And then I'm going to keep asking you more open-ended questions, because the reality of it is, if the prospect actually said to me, no, I don't want them to, then they're not a prospect anyway. They're just not. Right. Because if they don't want their reps to be cold calling, then we don't have anything to talk about. So it saves everybody a lot of time, because I didn't invest a lot of time into this. But most of the time, most of the time, the answer to that question is going to be yes, that they want them to. I don't care what the answer is if they are doing it is. So this first question that you ask has to be a question where you don't care what the answer is. Because when they give you an answer, you listen to it, you mirror it back, and then you ask them another question. The next question you ask to the prospect feels specific and tailored to them based on what they just told you. Now you're having a conversation. So you want to continue asking these open-ended questions that are also qualification questions. And then you want to move the conversation to giving them some examples, call, value, and story form, and then work them to the call to action, naturally. Make it sort of a natural segue. And that's really what the motion is. You're dancing around in here, qualification questions, value, and story form, and you're moving the prospect down to call to action, which is now at this point, I move here when it feels like a natural conclusion for both of us. That's the motion itself.
There's a question that's streamed in here that I think is interesting, because it's true in a lot of conversations when you might be apologizing to somebody or trying to make a statement in a dispute or an argument. Patrick had said he's been told that using "but" means everything you said before that is false, and that's how I've taken that historically. Again, and if it's like in an argument or an apology, hey, so on and so forth, but let me make my point again. What are your thoughts on
that's
the power
right on.
of that word? Right?
The word is so powerful because it negates everything that came before it, and allows you to focus the conversation on what comes after it. So that I agree with that. But where it's actually really strategic on a cold call is, yes, it will negate what comes before it. But if what came before it is a diffusing statement, right? A statement that either acknowledges resistance that the prospects put up, like, we don't have the bandwidth for that right now. If I said, look, right now it sounds like you don't have the bandwidth, I understand that, but I still get the benefit of diffusing the prospect, even though I've negated the words that I said. So when you use that word after a diffusing statement, and then you continue the conversation by asking an open-ended question, it's extremely effective on a cold call. And the reason why that is because you're dealing with an emotional decision process. Most of the objections and the resistance that you get, most of the objections you get are going to come in the form of resistance, but most of it is emotional, because the prospect doesn't know enough about you, your product, your solution, or what you're even talking about to have a logical objection most of the time. So you don't want to try and solve that. So you can use a diffusing statement, the word "but," and then you can ask an open-ended question. The goal is to get the prospect talking. The more they talk, the more insight you get as to things you can grab onto to make this more and more relevant to them and to tailor the conversation to them. And the truth is, all of this sounds kind of complicated if you're hearing it for the first time, but it's not. You just take a piece of paper and you write down 3 qualification questions on one side of the paper, and you write down 1 or 2 examples of value and story form on the other. And you use those qualification questions, which are open-ended, more than a yes or no answer, that, they require more than a yes or no answer, to get the prospect talking. And then the moment that it feels appropriate, you say, look, that's interesting. The reason I asked you that, we do work with another client in your space, and what they were able to do, boom. And then you immediately ask another question to get them talking more. And you say, look, go back to the resistance. Look, I understand that you told me up front that this, you don't really have a lot of bandwidth right now. I get that. But because of, grab onto something they said, I don't think it would be a waste of your time if we could set up a time to chat. At least it'll provide you with enough insight as to what you can be doing this quarter, and also will inform down the road if it makes sense for us to have a longer conversation. Would you be open to doing that? That's how you do it. I mean, the reality of it is I didn't try and solve whatever the resistance was. I just acknowledged it, and I got the prospect talking. That's it.
It's not so much everything before it was false. It's a natural shift from a break in the conversation,
Yeah.
right? So it can be used for diffusing. It can be for, everything I said up until that point was just, for you to hear me. Now I really want to make my statement. And I think that's, it's within context. That's why it's so powerful. And, strategically placing that with your other concept of this relevant clarity. I said that right again. I always get that wrong.
You got it right that time.
You're trying to, again, it's an interruption, especially if it's a cold call. I don't know who the heck you are. I'm trying to break through. Okay, this is a person. It's a human. They want to talk about this. And now I'm actually listening to the stages of the conversation necessary so that you can get into that open discussion. And I think the key here too is that open-ended or series of open-ended questions that don't put you into a hole. Yeah. A lot of times reps will come up with questions that basically, get them stuck. Like, oh, I guess we can't go anywhere. So the point you made at the end is that one question that you're going to ask. And I'm always armed with that too. If I could just ask one question, that's once you can have that nailed, where you don't care about the answer of that one question, but it sets the next set of the context for the discussion. That's super powerful. And you just walk through an exercise where you might be able to identify how to really set this up for success. So you're going to have 3 open-ended questions on one side and then 2 value stories on the other side. And you're trying to bring those 2 together
spend the time,
a journey.
Spend the time planning out your questions and stick to the questions that you planned out. If you don't do that and you don't really put the thought into that, you're going to, in the moment, you might wind up asking a dumb question that boxes you out. You might ask a question which the answer to it just shuts the conversation down. Yeah. I hear this all the time when I listen to call recordings. And, all you have to do to fix that is just to spend however long it takes to write down a list of really, really quality open-ended questions that are also qualification questions, meaning you need to know the answers to these anyway to advance the sales process. All that does is get the prospect talking in a way that's incredibly relevant to you. And that's exactly what you want to do here. At the beginning of the call, since Ryan got it right this time and called it relevant clarity as opposed to, I forget what you called it last time. I'll go ahead and just recap that. I mean, what that is when somebody picks up the phone, even if it's a follow-up call, when somebody picks up the phone, and you do this too, and you pay attention next time you pick up the phone, you don't know who it is. Your brain's doing this. Your brain starts to spin around in a feedback loop on overdrive. And what it's doing is it's trying to figure out if this is relevant or familiar. That's what it's really doing. And what we need to do in the beginning of the cold call is we need to say who we are, our company, and then provide, a few words to create a mental picture of our company, what it does in a way that's familiar to them. So with, phone ready leads or with phone burner, I'll use that example because it's top of mind right now. If I'm calling a sales leader that I know they have a sales team, right? I'm going to say phone burner, and then I'm going to say we're a power dialer for outbound reps. It's going to make total sense to this person. They don't have to burn any mental calories to form that mental picture. They have that mental picture, so now they're not distracted trying to figure anything out, so I can continue talking and they're with me. Okay, this is what happens when you don't establish relevant clarity in the beginning of the call. What happens is you ask, if you're using a permission-based opener, if you ask them if they have a minute or whatnot, you get this long pause and they're like, sure. Or they'll say, where are you calling from again? They're completely confused. And you just explained where you were calling from and they didn't listen because they were hung up on a lingering question. Really, really important to do this. It's also the same reason why you don't want to be too familiar with in your tonality when you say your name in the beginning of the call. If you listen to Ryan's calls, he's really good at that. It sounds elegantly busted, right? He'll slow down and he'll say his name. He'll slow down, make it so he doesn't have to repeat it again. It's like if you walk up to anybody and you just throw a basketball at their face when they're not expecting it's going to hit them right in the face. What Ryan's doing is he's holding the basketball up in front of them and going like this first. And they're doing that by slowing down in the beginning. Hi, my name's first and last name, using a tonality that conveys they don't know who you are. So you're avoiding that lingering question. So you're just trying to avoid lingering questions in the beginning of the call, give them a clear mental picture, and then you can go into this framework and actually get through the call into questions and get the prospect talking. And it works most of the time. Nothing works 100% of the time, but this actually works most of the time.
Yep.
Try it.
And this goes right into the start, stop, repeat framework that we've been running on these shows, where we talk about these gates, right? So that first gate that Woodward is talking about right now, when you're establishing relevant clarity, if you're getting hung up on people not even allowing you to continue for all these examples that Woodward has explained here, well, then you want to readdress that. And sometimes it might even be eliminating this concept. Sometimes it's adding it, in some types of campaigns, setting too much clarity. Like, for example, let's use the phone burner example. Maybe phone burner wants to have more conversations with teams, not just about the power dialing solution. It is their core feature, but they want to talk about more like workflow, engagement, and like insight, and keeping management on place and coaching and develop reps. Like maybe that's something they would want to go after, like a sales enablement person versus a sales leader. If you put that, we're a power dialer for salespeople, with that audience, they're gonna be like, oh no, we're good. We don't need a dialer, right? We already have something. Versus, well, check out this thing that keeps us in the flow state. And so if you're using the same phraseology to get into every conversation, and you're setting the wrong context, that can be harmful. And that's why you want to measure these things. And there's some questions streaming in here about permission-based openers, when to use them, when not to use them. And this is all going to depend on a lot of factors, but who you be as a seller, who you represent at the organization you work for, and then who you're targeting, for that message and offer. And finally, where they're at in that stage of the understanding of what you intend to deliver in that conversation. So if it's a truly cold call to a new audience, like there's a couple different gates you have to get through. And the very first one is, who the heck is this, as we're talking about? Who is this? Do I know you or not? What is this about? Do I care about it or not? Like, if you can't answer those questions without having to answer those questions, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're spending so much time trying to get through. No, sorry, what is this about? Who are you? What is this? Like, if you're in that trap, you should try some of these things we're talking about today. And these two tactics that Woodward has shared now, go back to the last one with relevant clarity. And today, with this BS framework, it really should start helping you set yourself up for getting through more of those gates, and eventually getting through to what we call completions, which is what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
Building awareness, gathering information, and then setting the next stage for the reason or the intent of my outreach in the first place. So, Woodward, this is fantastic. I don't know if there's any other points you want to make, or we can bring in a guest.
Well, I just want to double click. I want to double click on this again, just because it's the most important thing. If you don't establish that relevant clarity in the beginning of the call, everything that we're talking about right now doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter at all. And there's no other way to say it. If the beginning of your call, when you say your company and you explain what it does, has any words in it like optimize or streamline, it's not going to work. Those words don't mean anything to anyone, because they don't help them form a mental picture, because they're overused, they're business speak, that don't really always mean the same thing. So you want to overthink this. This is the part you want to overthink, and you want to plan it out. When you say what your company does, in is a little, 4 or 5 words at the most. You want to use words that, your persona is going to be able to immediately understand without burning any mental calories. Mental picture, boom, immediately. No mental calories burned. Think about how you can do that. And then that's it. The power dialer for outbound reps makes total sense to a VP of sales, right? I didn't say, we have a streamlined platform for managing your email, text, and also auto dialing in a way that builds momentum behind marketing and aligns. That doesn't mean shit to anyone. So you have to really think this through. And if you get this content from marketing, it's usually going to be something you're going to have to make some changes to for this application. Okay, that's another important thing. When I go into companies and I look at call scripts, a lot of it is brought in and sort of pasted in from marketing. just look at any company's website. The way they talk about their product is not the way you talk to a prospect directly when you're doing outbound. Most of the folks listening to this probably know that, but it's really worth double clicking that, because everything we're talking about today doesn't matter without that.
Correct. And if you're not getting past hello,
Yeah.
You really want to make sure you're in good shape. And this isn't a set it and forget it exercise either. You're stressing a point that I try to make often in this show, which is if you don't have your message literally written out, right?
Yeah.
You don't have your phraseology ready to go. You're just winging it on your calls. And if you're running call sessions where you're bouncing from persona to persona to persona to persona, you're really setting yourself up for a challenging time calling, right? List and message alignment is so key. And then even within that, as we're talking about something that sounds like, okay, I get it. But like, if you're not getting past those gates, you're never going to get into the reason for, or the intent of your outbound in the first place. And so helping you get into a position where you can get past hello and then now move into this, okay, what do you do, or how can I help you? We've provided two really powerful resources that if you go back and really take some time to develop for yourself, you'll start to see the needle move up and to the right. And to your point, Woodward, nothing's going to be 100%, but these tactics are going to be a little bit better than zero. So try them and see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do we have any volunteers today who want to pop in here and share what they're doing today with their outbound? So we don't need to run the start, stop, repeat, but this session is more about script breakdown. It looks like we have our first volunteer coming in now. Is it Milan? And you're on mute. Not sure if it. Now we got Richard. Richard, double R. I can get behind that.
That's you.
Richard, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, Richard.
Fantastic. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
To set some context for folks before we get into your messaging today, who is Richard? Where are you calling in from? And
I'm calling in from Boston. I'm with a software company called Alpha Software, and we let companies take their paper forms and turn them into mobile apps in a few hours. I actually have a question for you guys. The very opening stuff where you give people a chance to say, well, no, I don't have time. Is that best practices? You say, do you have time now? Isn't it an easy out for the prospect to say no? And if they say no, then you sort of are being rude and annoying if you continue. So I guess I'm really interested in getting your thoughts on that.
Go ahead, Woodward. You can start, and then I can provide my feedback too.
Look, that's a great question. If I asked you at that point of a call, if you were interested in something, the answer is always going to be no. So that's number one. The way that you can effectively diffuse that, the permission-based opener is effective for a lot of reasons, because if you follow it with silence, you can establish the control position on a call. Okay. So I'll give you an example. I don't know if I have this in this deck real quick. I can share something with you. Here. Let me just show you this. I can't show you that, actually. It's somebody else's. In the beginning of the call, if you provide context before the yes question, so do you have a minute, as an example, is a yes question. And if you basically it's so simple. If you provide context before that yes question by just saying, I'm just calling with a question, do you have a minute? And you arch downward with your tonality on minute, and you follow it with silence. Usually the prospect is going to say yes. Where you're going to get resistance is if in the beginning, if you didn't give them relevant clarity and you said, do you have a minute, without giving them proper context that you're just calling with a question. And if you use an upward tonality, like, do you have a minute? That's the subconscious flag for a pesky sales call. It's a pattern they're used to hearing, and they're going to deflect from that. I'm trying to pull something up on my screen that'll illustrate this point here. Just give me a second. Ryan, you can fill in some blanks there while I'm doing that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and so Richard, I mean, best practices, that's a subjective, anyone's opinion on that is going to be subjective, right? So best practices for you are, going to be different for me. But for the most part, a permission-based opener provides a sales rep the best opportunity to get past hello when somebody is indeed busy. From my work, making lots and lots of calls over the years, I test all sorts of different openers. And what I find is that if somebody truly is busy, and I haven't asked if now's a good time to talk or not, I don't get anywhere anyway. And when I do ask if now's a good time to talk and they truly are busy, I can gracefully exit that call and call them back. And the power of that follow-up when you respected their time gives me a much higher probability of getting through to this concept of a completion. So what most sales reps fail to understand is that when they're cold calling, most often they're so thirsty for someone to pick up because no one picks up. That's their problem. But the reality is somebody who picks up the phone tends to pick up the phone again and again and again and again. So this is not Eminem, 8 Mile. You don't only have one shot, one opportunity. And if I'm a professional seller, I would rather just say, hey, that's not a problem. I'll try you back and document that. Hey, last time when you pick up again, Richard, last time we spoke, that's how you open the next time. Last time we spoke, it sounded like it was the worst possible time. Do you have a minute now? You're going to get an opportunity more often than not at that stage. If it truly was a brush off or an objection in the first place, now you can get it. Because if they say, no, I'm busy again, you go, that's not a problem. Sounds like I'm catching you at the worst possible time. Do you mind if I just share a little bit of context of why I'm reaching out? And you can let me know if it's worth following up again or not. So that's what I've found to be super successful and why I am an advocate for a permission-based opener, because if someone truly is busy, you're never going to get past hello anyway.
Yeah.
That's reality.
No, that's a good, Ryan, that makes, and especially the point about if they're busy and you're respectful, then there's sort of a sense of obligation that next time, if they, there's an increased probability they'll talk to you. I mean,
it's dramatic, Richard. The data shows that someone who picks up the phone tends to pick up the phone again. So if your average connect rate is say 5%, it takes 100 dials to follow you. A follow-up list, someone who's picked up before, is going to be like 25%. Okay, so your likelihood of getting them on the phone again is very high. And more important than that is if your conversion rate on a cold call is, let's say, 10%. Your follow-up could be 2 to 3 times that.
Yeah.
So if you do the math on that, I can have a conversation every 4 dials versus every 20 on my follow-up, and I can convert a conversation of those conversations every let's say 3 to 5 versus every 10. And so if you combine those two, you're giving yourself about a 10 to 15x increase in efficiency.
Hey, Ryan, I have a related question to this. So you speak to the guy and you say, do you have time for this? And he says no. And then you say, okay, I'll let you continue doing and I'll reach back out to you. If you send an email after that saying, hey, thanks for picking up, appreciate you're busy, just to let you know, I'm planning on calling you next day or whenever you're going to call them, is that okay with you? So you're asking you're starting to build a rapport. Does that make a difference or just actually, does it hurt?
I wouldn't compound the email we call that a connect incomplete, meaning, hey, they're busy. You didn't even get past hello. They don't know any context yet. I wouldn't lose my bullet on having a deeper dynamic conversation via the phone versus somebody that just responds via email after that says, no, I'm good. I'm not interested. Not interested in what you haven't really had an opportunity to connect. Again, going back to the data, and I obsess over this stuff, is if I know you pick up, you tend to pick up again. So I'm not worried about getting you back on the line. And if I take good notes, I don't need to give you an opportunity to tell me that you're not interested in another channel yet. I know that you
Yeah.
are reachable on this channel. And the next
Got it.
time, if I reference a specific date and time, it'll set some, okay, this is legit. We did maybe speak before. And now to the earlier point, you're giving yourself a better shot of getting through to
Yeah.
completion.
So then one final question. I don't want to hog the whole webinar, but since most calls end up in voicemail, do you have any advice on what kind of message to leave on voicemail, or do you not even leave a message? What do you find works best?
Yeah, so Woodward can share his feedback on this too, because he has a different approach to some of this stuff. But for me, the data shows that if somebody's going to pick up the phone, about 80% of a list will pick up within 5 attempts. So if I'm calling someone for the first 5 times, I don't leave a voicemail, I don't do anything. I don't want to leave a breadcrumb. Just like if you picked up and hung up on me, I don't want to leave a breadcrumb because I haven't gotten to a completion. So in the first 5 attempts, I wouldn't leave any voicemails. I wouldn't leave messages with gatekeepers and operators. I just say that's not a problem. I'll try back.
Yeah.
If I know you pick up again and again. I don't need to worry about that. But if you haven't picked up at that point, I would then start to try to compound my phone conversation voicemail into like an email or a social, multi-touch or a combo strategy. And Woodward, you can talk a little bit about some of the things you do with your campaigns kits there, if you'd like, on how you're using voicemail to enable some of the other channel outreach that you might be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Ryan said. If you're doing, if you want the approach to be, a call only approach, or you really want to make sure that you're not doing anything other than calls until you've tried enough times to get them on the phone. But if you're also combining it with email, for example, and you get a voicemail, there's 2 things that I find very effective to do with voicemail. The first one is to get rid of the idea that the goal of the voicemail is to get the prospect to call you back. There's no ROI on that.
That's not going to happen. No.
So save 15 seconds in the voicemail by having to repeat your number twice. You want to put a human behind your approach. You don't want to do any pitching in the voicemail. And the goal now is to draw their attention to an email that you're going to send, and you're positioning the fact that you're sending it as a courtesy. And then you're going to set what's called a mini contract, which is basically as a courtesy. Feel free to let me know. My info will be in the email, but in any case, I can try you back again in a couple of days to see if you've had a chance to take a look. So when I call back, they believe that I'm going to call back because I just called, right? It drew their attention to an email that I just sent. It doesn't look like persistence, it's like courtesy, the way I positioned it. And when I call back in 3 days, the reason for my call isn't because I'm following up. The reason for my call is because I said I would. That's a great way to start a call. I sent you a note a couple of days ago, and I promised that I'd try to catch you at some point today. I don't expect you had a chance to take a look yet, and then you go quiet. Go for no, because you want them to feel completely comfortable saying, no, I haven't had a chance to take a look. You don't want any resistance there. So go for no. If they have taken a look, great, they'll tell you that. But if they haven't, what you want to do is preserve the ability to resend it and then call them back again in a couple of days. You want to avoid I'll let you know if interested. You want to keep control position over the entire interaction. So go for no when you get them on the phone when you're following up. So the voicemail sounds like this in that example. Relevant clarity, I'm calling with blank. We're a power dialer for outbound reps. You want to use that example. The reason for my call, 3 words, an observation about them. Tell you what I'll do. I'll go ahead and send you an email now with a little bit more background to see if this is something that you'd be open to chatting with me about. My info's in there, but feel free to let me know. In any case, I'll try you back again in a couple of days to see if you had a chance to take a look. Bye. That's it.
Okay.
Send the email. Yep.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you, Greg.
You're welcome.
All right, Richard, thank you for jumping in on the show. Let's see if we have another guest here with the last few minutes here, and then we'll open up for more Q&A. Brad, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brad.
Hey, Ryan. Hey, Ryan. Hey, Greg. How you doing?
Good.
Brad, a little context, where you're calling in from and who you work for.
Yeah, I'm calling. I'm calling in from a company called Cognism. So you're repping the hat already there, Ryan. I actually we've done this before, one of the stop-start ones, and that went quite well. So I thought I'd hop back on and see if you've got any more tips for me. So how can I start? Just start with my opener, or?
Yeah, it'd be awesome if you are open to it. let's walk through your framework. Let's mock a call. I won't grill you on the start, stop, repeat, but we have Woodward here now, so we can look at what you're doing today and maybe offer some suggestions around bringing in some more BS to your framework to see if that helps you out here, if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah, amazing. That'd be great.
So do you actually have your script written out as well, or is this?
When I started, I wrote it out. I think now, from making 100 calls a day for however many days, it's sort of imprinted on the back of my eyelids. So I'm happy to jump straight in if you guys are.
Do it.
Yeah, we can definitely do it. Hey, this is Ryan.
Ryan, hey, I'm gonna be honest with you. This is actually a cold call. Do you want to hang up now? Or give me 30 seconds and then decide.
You got a couple minutes. I respect the hustle. What do you got?
Yeah, a couple minutes. Appreciate it, right? Well, typically when I speak to sales directors like yourself, they normally tell me perhaps they're frustrated. The team have got all the gear they need to succeed. They're just not speaking to as many decision makers as they could be. And Ryan, they normally tell me it's one of three things, right? Either one, they don't know who to speak to in the companies they're targeting. Two, even if they know exactly who to speak to, they can't get numbers or emails for those people. Or actually, sometimes they've got all of that in place. It's just not giving them the results they would have hoped for. Maybe wrong numbers, emails, that sort of thing. But I've got a funny feeling, Ryan, you're probably going to tell me now not a word there really applies in your world for your team.
All right, I'll stop there. Thanks for sharing that with us. Let's take it to the Woodward over here. What do you think on the approach?
Well, I keep looking down just so I'm taking notes. I don't think I'm not listening.
No.
Who's the persona? Is it a sales leader that you're calling in that example?
Yeah, in that example, yeah.
Okay. They tend to be a little bit more playful, so the intro in that case would probably be okay. I mean, just everybody has their own style. You have a nice delivery style, so if you took that script and gave it to someone who had a more mechanical delivery style, it would be a disaster. Just the intro would be. It would sound awkward and weird. You were fine with it. If it weren't a sales leader, I'm like, let's just make something up and say it was like an HR leader. I wouldn't use that intro because it's starting with the word. You want to avoid the phrase "to be honest." I mean, the way you used it was a little different, so it was okay. But it basically will convey. It kind of jarred me a little bit if I were the prospect, but in this application, I guess it was okay. I see what you were doing there. I mean, I think it was okay. I mean, it's not an approach that I would use just because my delivery style is different. You were going for the way that you were asking questions was really disarming, I guess. I mean, because you were kind of going for no, and
is that disarming? Is that disarming good or disarming bad?
No, it's good. It's good because if to give you an example, this entire call, you're still dealing with an emotional decision process. So if you ask somebody point blank if they're interested in something, it's a ton of resistance. Yeah. Any kind of question where you want the answer to be yes to is going to have a ton of resistance. It doesn't matter what the question is. Do you have a minute? We'll have a ton of resistance. So we use context to diffuse that yes question. In your case, you're using the way you're asking the question as a diffusing method. You're basically going for no. I don't suppose, or I don't expect that. Make it easy for them to say no, but keep them in the conversation. Ryan, what did you think? I'm curious. I think we lost Ryan. He's frozen.
Yeah, I'm having an internet connection issue. I don't know if I'm back yet. I'm trying to.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Make sure I'm. Yeah. So the framework you're running right now, Brad, is very Sandler-esque. The folks at Sandler that I do the live show with run a very similar framework, and I really enjoy it. I heard your use of but there on that transition at the end too into the question, which was great. I'm not sure if there's a way to think about trying to add in some of the but so's when you move through the three statements you have. And if you were to go back and look at what we shared today and see if you can layer it in there, there's a stage in there where I was getting a little bit lost on maybe the second use case, right? When you started to say like, I'm already tooled up, and I was like, okay, get to the point. So layering in a but and a so there might actually work pretty well. But I think just like in our start, stop, repeat session that we had done together, what I love about your approach is that it is you. It feels authentic.
Yeah,
you've got a lot of energy, and it's not forced, right? It's for the right person, very conversational. That monologue section, which is what we're here to talk about today, is a little bit long,
Yeah.
And if you're finding that some folks are getting lost halfway through, that maybe interrupting you, like, yeah, we're good, that type of thing that might start happening. No, yeah. Trying this layering in of some buts and some so's, or a but and a so, before you get to that last open minute question, might do you some justice. But I really do think that that approach works pretty well. I see the Sandler guys pull it off often, and you're not as slow and deliberate as like Jake Alba, who runs that thing, which can get really long. So layering in there would be pretty powerful. But that's the
Brad.
that's
What was the question you asked again at the end of the script?
At the end, I said I've got a funny feeling you're probably going to tell me now. Not a word there really applies. Why'd you ask?
Okay. No, I like that question. I mean, I was wondering if we could use a question where you don't care what the answer is, but the truth is
okay.
like, I don't think you should care what the answer is to that question, because if a word doesn't apply, then nobody's time's wasted.
Well, that's it. That's it.
Yeah, I like that question. I wouldn't change it.
Oh, I appreciate that. And actually, this is really useful because I have had a few instances, especially if you're speaking to, I completely agree, first off, Greg, that if I was speaking to someone from HR, they would absolutely tell me no. I don't want to deal with a cold call. I even get it with marketing people sometimes. We target marketers and they don't respond to it.
But sales leaders appreciate it. They appreciate it.
The most common response from that one with a sales leader is a chuckle and go on, something like what Ryan gave me. But my question would be is because I've got 3 issues, right, that I'm solving, which is they don't know who to speak to. They know who to speak to, but can't get mobiles, or maybe they're dealing with wrong mobiles. How can I, or cell phones, how can I reduce that so that actually I'm getting a couple points across that I can loop back around with questions later to keep a conversation moving, but actually I'm not losing you guys how you were talking about as it is now.
If I understand correctly, the question, the prospects.
I didn't word it very well.
No, you did. It just takes me a while to process things in my head. The prospects it's the point. The prospects are having an issue, a problem with mobile. They don't know how to get mobile. Is that?
Yeah. So like cell phones, emails, that sort of thing.
Yeah. That's a question that you don't care what the answer to is if you phrase it correctly.
Okay.
I mean, that would actually be worth thinking about. I mean, if you don't really care what the answer is, if you phrase it correctly, I mean, I could phrase it in a way where you do care what the answer is. But that would be a good one, because if that's a pain point that most of the prospects that you're approaching are having, you can position it in an open-ended question and just ask them, and it'll get them talking.
Okay.
And then you can acknowledge part of what they said, and then you can give them an example of a case study or just one value point about someone else. If the value is about someone else, I'm not directing it at you. There really is no resistance, but certainly much less, if any, because I'm not trying to influence you directly, and you're still dealing with that emotional decision process. That's the idea. Yeah. Brian, do you have anything to fill in on that?
Well, I think if you take some of the feedback if you're trying to incorporate some of the stuff from Woodward's approach, right? The first thing that you'd want to think about is how can you set some relevant clarity at the front of the conversation around the pain. Like Cognism is what, right? You're providing
mobiles, emails,
contact information for sales teams. Like come up with again, you got to take some time to really get that right for each persona, but try to see if you can have a relevant clarity statement there to set it. Like, okay, I get what this is. Cognism, we are the preferred data vendor. That's too buzzwordy anyway, but we are the data vendor for sales teams, right? Whatever, right?
Yeah.
We provide great data for sales teams or something like that. And maybe great's not even the right word there, but you get my point. Yeah. Now, once you've set the clarity, as you get into your the value pitch section of this, which you're basically saying, when I speak to someone, they're layering out these problem statements. You can try to move that back into more of the kind of how how this is what most people have to deal with. Over here, it's like that. It's very similar to the experience that Woodward already, or the example Woodward shared with phone ready leads, which is, hey, most of the teams we're selling, we talked to today, in your segment, it takes 35 dials to talk to one person. With us, it's only 4. So you could whittle that down to say most of the sales teams we're working with, they just don't have all the contact information they need to get conversations started. Cognism, we solve that through X, Y, and Z. let me
Mhm.
pause there. I'm guessing you're going to tell me right now that you have all the data possible so that your reps are in a bunch of conversations, right? Or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
So
Yeah, I
you
like
can
that.
position it like most of the companies we work with, with the fragmented work environment. Some people are doing hybrid, some people are working remotely now. They're not getting that clean data set on access numbers.
Yep.
So we're filling in that gap with relevant mobile data, and then you turn that into a question and just say, look, I mean, I'm imagining that your personas are probably a mixture of all remote. Are you mainly calling cell phones at this point?
Yep. Okay.
And just
And then,
let
as
them
you
tell
say,
the answer
you
is going
don't
to be
care about
yes.
that answer. Yeah.
Yeah, if the answer is no, then ask them another question. You don't really care what the
Yep.
answer is, but the answer is going to be
Yep.
yes. If you know that's well, it is, because I can tell you that if you don't have mobile numbers right now and you're B2B, you're in a real tough spot. I know that for a
Couldn't
fact,
agree
just like
more.
you do.
Couldn't agree more.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think if I've got it. Well, another question would be is where, if I did lose you in that monologue there, whereabouts was it? I know, Ryan, you mentioned, whereabouts was it that I was losing you, and how could I prevent that?
Ryan?
well, for me, it's about that second, when you were going through the monologue, it's about the
Yeah.
second problem where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I get it. Like, if the first one resonated with me, I'd be in. If it didn't, you're going to definitely lose me by the second one.
Okay.
If your shot's a little bit off, that's where I feel the tension a little bit. And so trying to condense that a little bit more with, again, who you are, like the clarity around why you're calling, and then the way that Woodward's the BS framework works is you're using a customer story with like proof point, like inside that monologue versus like the problem stop point. So
Yeah.
if you can somehow condense it into, here's what we do, here's the problem we solve, and for example, like this, and then stop with the question, that will allow you to break that up a little bit. But I'm not saying you have to make that move. I think that if you use a strategic but and a so in the transition between the two of them,
Yep.
you might be able to keep them around for a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So I speak with sales leaders often, and they tell me a couple of things. The first is boom, but other times they tell me,
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
such and such. So from time to time, that results in this, and I'm going to stop there. But if I would have to look at that a little bit, but
Yeah,
that's
it's hard
where
for me to answer the question without
Get it.
seeing the script up, but I think I heard a but in there, I believe.
It was
I was
when he went
listening.
to the question, which is when
Yeah.
it popped for me too. I was like,
But I've
Yeah.
got a
strategic.
feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so if I had the script up on the screen, I could provide a little bit better, accurate feedback than this. But I think what Ryan is saying is just try and cut it up a little bit more with one more but or one more so, and anything that's not critical, take it out, just to try and shorten it.
Take it out.
But I found it to be relatively digestible. I did lose you in the middle, but granted, in your defense, I was listening for like 4 or 5 different things and taking notes while you were doing it, so I was kind of distracted anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, your delivery style really works with that approach.
I appreciate that. Okay.
Yeah, and that's an important point to make, because if you took a script that worked really well for me and you handed it to someone else that has a different delivery style,
Yeah.
it's not a good fit for them, and so you have to adapt things to the way that you sound, and the best way to do that is listen to your call recordings, just to kind of hear what your range is and what sounds elegant coming out with your delivery style on a script, and making changes to that script to fit it. Most people don't do that, and they should.
Yeah, I mean, we work on there's 50 people in our team, and they're all trying different styles, and you think that person's definitely wouldn't work with that person's approach. So I think it's, once you've found something that works for you and you're confident delivering that, you have some success.
Yeah.
There's still always room for refinement. I mean, this is what learning from you two is really helpful with. So thank you for the tips.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on, Brad. Keep up the great work, and report back on how things go. If you
thanks, Ryan.
Share something over. I'm always available, brother. Thanks for popping
Yeah,
on.
appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So I think there's only 3 minutes left here as I see a clock chatting down. There's a couple of Q&A questions here that will pop into the show, and try to get maybe 1 or 2 of these answered, and then maybe we'll have to have Woodward back in a future show because there's just went by so fast. So We don't need to read this out word for word, but I'm mostly dealing with startups. They just hang up once you introduce yourself. So my question, should a sales call sound like a sales with an intro like this, or should I approach them beforehand like a WhatsApp message? Perfect question. So basically you're asking if you can use another channel to warm up your cold call, which I talk about often. My personal opinion on this is no. There's no warming up a conversation. What's happening right now is what we try to address in the show, is that your introduction is either not setting proper relevant clarity, or
Yeah.
you're coming through way too salesy out the beginning, and you're getting
Yeah.
hung up on. So using another channel to warm up a sales conversation it's like I think it's like a unicorn. It doesn't really exist. But Woodward, I'm happy to have you answer what your thoughts are here.
People call startups all the time. I mean, my guess, which I'm pretty certain about, if you're getting hung up on at scale, I mean, it's happening often. It's a combination of what you're saying and how you're saying it. When we pick up the phone, you do this too, I do this, everybody does. Our subconscious spinning around trying to assess what this is. Do I know this person? Is it relevant to me? Is it a pesky sales call? And if it sounds like a pesky sales call, then you've automatically just inherited the baggage associated with how that makes that person feel. And the call's over. The way that it would sound that way is if you sounded too buttoned up, you rushed through your name, they didn't catch it, and then you were using salesy tonality. So let me put it to you this way: if you basically just said, "Hi, this is Greg with Woodward Strategies. Do you have a minute?" You're going to get hung up on every single time. In fact, if I made that call and spoke with 100 people, every single one of them would hang up on me. And the reason why is because I didn't give them any relevant clarity, and I used a salesy tonality, versus saying, adding in some context before the yes question and giving them relevant clarity, and then stating my full name using a tonality that conveys to them that they don't know who I am. So I'm avoiding that lingering question. Sounds like this. Hi, my name's Greg Woodward. I'm a consultant based in DC. I'm just calling with a question. Do you have a minute? And then I go silent, arching downward on minute, going silent, gives me the control position on the call. Nothing works 100% of the time, but that usually works. And it's really just a function of arching downward with your tonality on the yes question, giving them a little bit of context before asking the yes question, and then giving them relevant clarity about what you are, what you represent in the very beginning of the call. That's all it is. So the short answer is if you just hyper focus in on the intro only and getting that perfect, you're gonna fix your problem.
Right in time.
Boom.
I think we just ended. Thank you all for tuning in. We will see you in 2 weeks for another live cold calling. And hopefully we can get Woodward back in the future.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Happy calling.